Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's top 20 episodes of Star Wars Rebels. In this video, I will count down my top 20 favorite episodes of Star Wars Rebels. So this video is a conclusion to my coverage of Star Wars Rebels, where I had covered every single episode of Rebels one season at a time. This is sort of to celebrate and conclude that coverage of Rebels. So, therefore, I'm not trying to make this video succinct in like a 10-minute get-along video for everyone to watch. I'm just going to babble on for however long I feel like. However, I don't think this video should be too long. But it won't be your traditional 5-minute just rambling off episodes. Now, usually when I do these covers and I cover every every episode of a show one season at a time, usually I do a top best episodes list and then a worst episodes list. But I decided not to do a worst episode list for Rebels because there's not really any bad episodes in the show. Sure, there's some mediocre ones. There's some meh ones that were kind of boring and not that great. But they're not, like, terrible. And so it would end up being a list of mediocre episodes. And I didn't really find any desire or need to do so. So, I am just going to be doing this top 20 best episodes of Star Wars Rebels. So, let's go ahead and get into it. So, as I watch every episode of Rebels, I gave it a rating between 1 and 10, 1 being the worst, 10 being the best. And so, for this top 20, I had grouped those episodes together in their ratings, of course, and I'll be starting with the 8 rating, the episodes I gave an 8 to, and then I'll move on to my 9, and then the singular 10 episode. And so each time before I list the episodes of a given rating, I will have the rating card flash on the screen so you know how which grouping these episodes I'm about to talk about are in. So let's go ahead and get started. So, coming in at number 20 is Ghosts of Geonosis. Interesting third season episode that had reintroduced Saw Gerrera. I believe this is the episode that came out around the same time as Rogue One did, where they had Saw Gerrera appear in that film, who apparently first made his appearance in Clone Wars. Of course, he's a lot older here and made to look like Forrest Whitaker, who portrayed him in Rogue One. Now, he is a bit of a rogue rebel who kind of goes against the rules, which they explore a bit more later. But here, our group of rebels is forced to work with him and find it a bit difficult as they find this sole surviving member of the race, the Geonosians, and he wants to just kill him, or he constantly threatens his life, which is not okay with Ezra and Hera and the others. And so that created a very interesting dynamic, very interesting, because Saul accused him of helping the Empire, but in fact he was not helping the Empire. The Empire had wiped out his species, and so he wanted to take him back to interrogate him, whereas Ezra and Hera and the others just wanted to let him go because he had a whole sack of eggs that could repopulate his species, so they wanted to let him go and do that, which eventually they do. Eventually they talk Saul, but it created a conflict between them, and in the meantime they were like trapped under these underground caverns as the Empire was overhead trying to blow them to bits. So overall, found it really interesting and very intense. So next we'll get into my number 19, The Siege of Lothal. This is the season 2 premiere, the first episode of season 2, which dealt with our group meeting Ahsoka Tano, which very very great that they brought this character into Clone Wars. Into Rebels from Clone Wars, but I was a bit disappointed that she didn't appear more often in the show. That she kind of just, after season 2, just disappeared and appeared in like 1 or 2 episodes of season 4, and that was it. But this was a good use of her, and also a good use of Darth Vader, because in season 1, their biggest villain were these Inquisitors, the Grand Inquisitor, but here they're facing off against someone who's even more menacing, and of course he it's Darth Vader. When he appears, it's like they're all screwed now, and that really, because they went to Lothal for a particular mission, but ended up having to abandon that and being chased away by Darth Vader. Like, that was really super intense. So next, we'll get into my number 18, Rebel Resolve, an episode from season 1 where Kanan is captured and being tortured by Grand Moff Talking, and they go on a rescue mission to rescue him. And I remember this episode being pretty intense, and that's pretty much all I gotta say about that one. So next we'll get into my number 17, Call to Action, which is the episode that preceded this one, where our group of rebels attacked this communication tower on Lothal, and everything didn't go quite according to plan, because, as I just mentioned, Kanan ended up getting captured by the Empire, and that was really super intense, like the whole way that this played out. So I thought this was one of the better episodes of season 1. So next we'll get into my number 16, Kindred, season 4 episode, where again, this is season 4, but the rebels find themselves kind of at a disadvantage. They showed up to Lothal hoping to free it, and find out that they're greatly outnumbered, and they're pretty much like doing an impossible mission. And here they're being chased by this particular, I don't know what you would even call him, but he's like a minion of Admiral Thrawn. He's like this creature who can like smell and sense people out, and he's like moves like a spider really fast, and so he finds out where they're hiding, where their base is, and so they're screwed, and all these Imperial forces come and converge on them, and it looks like that they're gonna die and they're hopeless. But this is when they introduce the Loth Wolves, who apparently are like special and has some connection with the Force, and they take them to this like little portal and that lets them travel to the other side of the planet to get away from them, which was super intense. It was not only was intense, it was a great way to introduce these characters, and I thought these wolves were a great introduction to season 4 that helped flesh it out more and make it a bit more interesting. So next we get into my number 15, Holocrons of Fate. This is season 3 episode that follows up with the season 2 finale, where Darth Maul has the Jedi holocron and or the Sith one. I think he has the Sith one, and Ezra has the Jedi one, and they want to combine them which is a dangerous sort of endeavor. Of course, Darth Maul forces the issue when he abducts the crew of the Ghost and forces Ezra to do this. Really intense. I like the use of Darth Maul in Rebels. They made him a very fucked up, very interesting character. And so this one really worked for me. So next we'll get into my number 14, Wolves in the Door, season 4 episode towards the end of season 4, where there is a imperial archaeologist who works directly for the Emperor Palpatine and is trying to who they invade the Jedi Temple on Lothal, and they're trying to uncover its secrets, particularly this portal that would make the Emperor pretty much invincible and impossible to defeat. And Ezra and Sabine infiltrate the base with the hopes of stopping them, but then Sabine gets abducted and is kind of forced to work with this archaeologist, but of course ends up tricking him. Meanwhile, Ezra manages to open the portal, but goes in himself and closes it behind him. Setting up for another great episode, which will appear later on my list. But yes, pretty intense episode that I liked. So next we'll get into my number 13, Through Imperial Eyes. So this is a concept episode that followed, God, I can't even remember that dude's name now, but the guy who at first in season 1 was the villain, and then season 2 he had this get together meeting with Zeb, and they worked and saved each other's lives, and he kind of had a change of heart, and this follows him on an Imperial vessel as as a concept episode, because we get the whole episode takes place on this Star Destroyer and follows them as the main characters. Of course, Ezra is sent on a mission to rescue him because he's in danger of being discovered by the Empire. So even though he's been spying for the rebels for this time, his life is in danger. So Ezra comes on board with the intention of pulling him out. However, Callus, that's his name, Agent Callus. However, Callus instead puts the blame on this other guy, and so he decides to stay on board the Star Destroyer because he thinks he's more helpful to the rebellion as a spy. However, it turns out Thrawn could see through Callus's deception and knows that Callus is the rebel spy, but allows him to stay so he can use him to get more information on the rebellion, which was a nice little twist. So this was quite the intense episode. As I said, it was a very nice change up from what they normally do. So next we'll get into my number 12, Twin Sons. This is when and I believe this is season 3, towards the end of season 3, and Darth Maul's on this quest to get his revenge on Obi-Wan, and he finds out Obi-Wan's on Tatooine, but he can't find him, so he lures Ezra there, and Ezra completely falls into his trap, and his intention is to use Ezra to find Obi-Wan, which is successful because Ezra is near death, and Obi-Wan shows up to save his life. However, things don't go so well for Darth Maul because Obi-Wan ends up killing him. For once and for good, hopefully. Hopefully he stays dead this time, as far as I know. So this was a really intense episode. It was great to get the final showdown between Obi-Wan and Darth Maul, and I like the use of Obi-Wan. Seeing him interact with Ezra was really awesome. So yeah, this was a pretty powerful episode. So next we will get to my number 11, 0 Hour. This is the 2-part season finale of season 3, which shows that while the rebellion is planning on launching this mission to free Lothal, instead Thrawn finds out where their base is, where Chopper Base is, and sends the full force of the Empire to destroy them. So instead of going on the mission to Lothal, they find themselves under siege and trying to escape the Empire that is about to kill them all. And they create a blockade, and while Hera and others build a shield to hold off the Empire, of course this is not a permanent measure, so Ezra escapes the blockade to retrieve Sabine and her Mandalorian forces, because at the moment she's on Mandalore, and to elicit their help to go back and break the blockade, which they do in part 2 and manage to escape. So super, super intense episode where the stakes are really high and the characters really shine through. So now it's time to get into my top 10. Top 10 favorite episodes of Star Wars Rebels. So we'll start with my number 10, A Fool's Hope, which is, I believe, the second to last episode of the show of season 4. And that is, if you count the last episode as one episode, as a two-parter, as 2-hour episode, which I do, or 1-hour episode, I think. But anyway, A Fool's Hope shows that when their ally, the former president of Lothal, whatever he was, so he fools the current imperial governor of Lothal into thinking that he's going to betray his group of rebels, but of course, and I knew this was quite predictable, and it was just falling into a trap that Ezra has set so that they could lure them to this side of the planet so that they could capture this governor and use her to invade the actual imperial grounds of Lothal and get rid of their rebellion, and I mean get rid of the imperial forces on Lothal and free Lothal. And so this is a huge step in that seemingly impossible plan, and this comes into fruition when you get all these other, basically all these various characters who appeared throughout the first 4 seasons show up, like Hondo and other people and the other like bounty hunter guy or whatever. They all show up and to help in this effort, which will be realized in the finale. So that was really good setup and pretty intense in its own right. So next we will get into my number 9, which is Rebel Assault. This is again in season 4, a bit earlier in season 4, dealing with their desire to free Lothal, and you have Ezra and Kanan and all the other rebels on Lothal. However, Hera will return to the rebellion base to try to gain support and bring back ships to help attack the Imperial blockade there, which they attempt to do, and with not much success, as Thrawn is, a master villain. He was prepared for them, a mastermind, and pretty much is able to defeat them, and a few of the rebel fighters, pilots, including Hera, managed to escape with their lives and crash into the city. However, Thrawn then sends, his minion, Ruck, I think his name is, out to, because he has that weird sense of smell, he sends him out to capture all the rebels that survived the Lothal. So it becomes like a race, and then Hera meets up, is with Chopper and meets up with another rebel pilot, and they're, I believe there might have been someone else there too. So they're on the run, where Kanan tries to go back into the city to sort of rescue him, because he knows that Hera's in danger, and this is something he can't abide. But Hera ends up sacrificing herself, getting herself captured in order to save the other 2. So, yeah, absolutely intense, extremely intense episode. So now we're getting into my 9 rated episodes, stepping up a bit, and we'll start with my number 8, Doom. So this is the follow-up episode to Kanan's death, and these Loth wolves, who seem to have these kind of magical powers, sort of surround Ezra, in which we find out is a vision, but it's a vision sent by the wolves. And it's kind of unclear to me whether or not Kanan had reincarnated with as a wolf, or if the wolves just are in touch with the Force, so they're in touch with Kanan, whose Force left his body or whatever. They're just connected to that. But they send Ezra on the mission to, free the Jedi Temple, which had been captured by the Imperial forces, which I touched on in an earlier episode of my countdown. And so that was a really, cathartic character moment for Ezra, and having him deal with the grief of Kanan's death. And I thought this was a pretty powerful way to do this. And at the same time, you got Zeb and Kanan having to, Zeb and Sabine having to face off against Ruck, who is trying to kill them, and they end up getting the better of him. So that was pretty good as well. So next we'll get into my number 7, Heroes of Mandalore, getting more into the Mandalorian plot, which I did really like. This, I believe, was the 2-part season premiere of Season 4, which dealt with Sabine and her family, along with Ezra and Kanan's help, freeing her people from the Imperial forces there, which was pretty intense, as she uses the dark saber and gets help from... what's her face? What's her name? God damn it. Bo-Katan, yes. She gets help from Bo-Katan, who was a character from Clone Wars, who apparently hasn't aged much in the 30 years, but whatever. And Sabine makes her the rightful leader of Mandalore, which she deserves to be after they kick out the Empire. Because the Empire tried to use some weapon that she had made when she was much younger, that specifically targets Mandalorian armor, but she manages to counter that and change that weapon to target Stormtrooper armor instead. Super intense. Love the Mandalore plot overall, and this was a great conclusion to that. So next we'll get into my number 6, which is Twilight of the Apprentice, the 2-part season 2 finale, which at first I thought was maybe not as good as I thought, because it was hyped up a bit for me, because IMDb, this is, I believe, the highest rated episode in IMDb, but it was still a really good episode. I still really loved it, because this was the introduction of Darth Maul into Rebels, as it saw, it was obvious it was Darth Maul to me, but as Kanan and Ezra were exploring this Sith temple in order to uncover this Sith holocron, they come across Darth Maul, who kind of is tricking Ezra for his own purposes, and meanwhile there's Grand Inquisitors who are flying around their lightsabers, which that part of it is kind of silly, but anyway, they're tracking them down, and it eventually leads to Darth Vader, and we get this huge confrontation. It felt really like something that had been building between Darth Vader and his former apprentice Ahsoka Tano, as they face off with each other. And of course this is when Kanan gets blinded, which is also super intense and something that will have effects on the rest of the show. And Ezra and Kanan just barely manage to escape, whereas Ahsoka Tano's fate is unclear, as she's pretty much facing down the evil Darth Vader. So, yes, really intense 2-parter that I did actually appreciate a lot. So next, it's time to get into my top 5, and we'll start with my number 5, Legacy of Mandalore. So this it was season 3 that dealt with Sabine returning to Mandalore with the Darksaber and trying to convince her family to fight for her. But at first, her family, they're worried about her father, who is under Imperial, protection or whatever, or he's pretty much a hostage of the Imperial forces on Mandalore. So her family at first turn on her and Ezra and decide to give them up to the Empire, but the Imperial forces decide to turn on her family anyway, which is a really bad move on their part because it just unites the whole family against them, and they finally decide to free themselves of Imperial rule, which, again, great, really intense. Love this Mandalore story. So next we'll get into my number 4 best episode of Rebels, and that is A World Between Worlds. So this follows up from the Wolves in the Door episode where Ezra had to open up a portal, and it's into this, it was kind of like where linear time, he exists outside of linear time. And this is how, and this also ties back into the Triad of the Apprentice episode, because this is where he's able to pull Ahsoka Tano from her defeat against Darth Vader and pull her out of time and into this weird realm. But of course we find that the Emperor is trying to gain access to this realm because it would give him pretty much unlimited power, and I think he tracks Ezra there and is trying to use Ezra. But before we get this really, really great character beat where Ezra finds that since he exists outside of linear time, that he could save Kanan the same way in which he saved Ahsoka Tano, but she points out that Kanan sacrificed himself to save the others. So if Ezra changes that, then all the people that he loved would die. And so he would basically be undoing how he chose to end his life, which is not fair. And so Ezra's forced to deal with this and to face it and to truly accept Kanan's death. And god damn it, was that really, really powerful. It was so powerful. But then again, after this decision, the Emperor tracks them there, and so they find that they need to leave this realm immediately, otherwise the Emperor will gain access to it. But they manage to leave, and then Ezra, with the help of Sabine and the others, destroys the portal for good, so that the Empire will never have access to it. So really intense episode, I absolutely loved. So next we'll get into my number 3rd favorite episode of Rebels, and that is Trials of the Darksaber. This is the episode that precedes Legacy of Mandalorian Season 3, where Kanan basically has to convince Sabine to wield the Darksaber and to return to Mandalore, which takes some convincing because she knows that her family hates her. But this episode makes it so high for me because it was such a great character story. For me, it's one of the best character stories of the show, where, while Kanan and Ezra are trying to train Sabine, she is getting frustrated and finds it difficult, and it leads to this huge face-off between her and Kanan, where he gets her to realize her full potential and what she can really do, but at the same time she gets them to realize that even though it's the Darksaber is a Jedi weapon, that she's not a Jedi, and it's also a Mandalorian weapon, and Mandalore is quite different than Jedi, and she needs to be something beyond both, sort of a combination of both. And so it was just a really good character story. So next, we'll get into my number 2, second favorite episode of Rebels, and that is Jedi Knight. So this is when, after Hera crashed on Lothal and is being held by the Empire, Kanan launches a mission to rescue her, and of course Zeb and Ezra go along, but Kanan alludes to the fact that he knows, and it's probably through his Force abilities or whatever, but he knows that he's not going to survive this mission. and so you can tell that, and I like that foreshadowing. And he's saying his goodbyes. And then he goes to and does manage to rescue Hera, who is like under the influence of these truth drugs, so she's a bit like drugged out, and so you get this like truthful moment between her and Kanan, who actually love each other. Which I thought the romance was kind of introduced kind of haphazardly in the last season, but it was used so well, particularly in this episode, that I can't really fault it. And they have this moment together where they realize their love for each other, and then then the Empire shows up, and this governor decides to blow up these gas tanks in order to kill them all, and the only way to save them is for Kanan to sacrifice himself, which he does. And yeah, I shed a few tears in this episode. I will admit that it was extremely powerful and just a great way to kill off a great character. So finally, we will get to my number one favorite episode of Rebels, which is the only episode to receive a 10 out of 10 for me, but I still love this show. And that is the series finale, Family Reunion and Farewell. I thought this was a really great series finale, a perfect way to end the show. Extremely powerful. As I said, it brings back like all these characters that we've seen throughout the years and how they work together to overcome the seemingly impossible situation of freeing Lothal from Imperial rule, where they had to directly face off against Grand Admiral Thrawn, who has shown himself through the course of season 3 and 4 of Rebels to be a mastermind, a genius, an impossible foe to defeat. And in fact, the only way Ezra can defeat him is by kind of, in the way, sacrificing himself. He doesn't die, but he does go away. Something that is still yet to be resolved, but hopefully will be resolved eventually. But he needs to do that, and he makes that decision in the same way Kanan made a decision to sacrifice himself. And again, this character decision was completely earned, particularly through episodes like World Between Worlds, where Ezra has fully grown. Like, this whole show was such a great character journey for Ezra, how he grew from this, thug who's just very angsty and didn't really, have any direction, and he grew into this wise Jedi Knight who was willing to sacrifice himself in order to save his people. Extremely powerful and well earned payoff for the entire show, which is why it was a great way to end the show. And as I said, you have all the cameos of all these characters who appear, and they all participate, and particularly having Hera in Imperial base trying to free it while Zeb faces off against Rokt and finally defeats him. So you get really great character ending moments for pretty much all the characters there. And then we end the entire series with Sabine and her voiceover, which we jump to after Return of the Jedi, where he explains what everyone's been up to and what people have been doing, and how she's still there on the Thal, and they had the Empire never retook the Thal because they had bigger things to worry about when the rebellion started to explode. And then Ahsoka shows up, and where Sabine says that Ezra's still out there and we need to find him. It was in seeing the portrait of our main characters, the group of rebels surrounded by the Loth cats and the Loth wolves. God damn, again, tears. It was really touching and a very, very satisfying ending to the show, which makes this my number one favorite episode of Rebels. So that is it for my top 20 favorite episodes of Rebels. Thank you so much for watching this video. Thanks so much for everyone for watching my entire coverage of Rebels. Now, I do have just one video left in covering these Star Wars cartoons, and that is The Bad Batch Season 1, which I will cover later this month. And then eventually when Season 2 comes out, I'll do a video for that, but apparently that's getting delayed, so I'm not sure when that's coming out, but maybe sometime this year, I hear. But so yeah, I'll be covering the first 2 seasons of The Bad Batch, but then that's it for my Star Wars cartoon coverage, and I'll basically just be covering any Star Wars shows as they come out. So thank you so much for everyone for watching my coverage. Thanks so much for watching this video, and thanks for supporting the channel. And if you are finding me the first time, please check out my channel as I cover many more videos on a lot of Star Trek videos out there. I cover pretty much all things Star Trek, as well as other shows like Lower Decks, which is airing at the moment, and House of the Dragon and Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.